We are. Hello, everyone, and welcome. A good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to our Workforce Retention Grant Expense Report informational session. Before I pass it over to Jessica Nielsen at OCFS, I do have a couple of brief housekeeping items. First is that all lines are muted. However, we do encourage questions throughout the presentation today. So if you do have any questions, just put those into the Q&A box. We are going to wait until the very end of today's presentation to read out those Q&A questions. Secondly, this presentation is being recorded. We are doing 4 of these over the next 2 weeks. We will post the best one, and we will also post the PowerPoint deck. And I'm having a little issue going forward with my PowerPoint, so I'm just going to stop presenting for just a minute. I'm just going to change how this is being presented. So hold on with me. While we're doing that, I will go over our agenda. So that was my brief housekeeping. I'm then going to pass it over to Jessica Nielsen from OCFS to give us an overview of the Workforce Retention Grant. She's then going to go through reporting expenses for Component A and reporting expenses for Component B, and we'll be sure to save lots of time for Q&A. All right, I am back in business here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share this again. Here we go. All right. So there was our agenda. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jessica to get us started out today.
Thank you so much, Piper. Welcome, everyone. As Piper said, we're here to talk about the expense report that will be coming due soon for the Workforce Retention Grant. I do see a lot of questions coming in the inbox about payments, staff roster issues, delays in payments. So we do encourage you, if you have any of those kind of questions, to please reach out to your local CCR&R, your child care resource and referral agency. They can best assist you and guide you on any updates or answer the questions you have or escalate them if necessary. So we're not going to go into individual questions today about your specific scenario, but we will answer any questions generally related to the expense report. And again, if you contact your local CCR&R, that would be the best avenue for you to get any updates on your payments or if you are waiting on a staff roster addition. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through a quick overview of the Workforce Retention Grant, just as a reminder of the two components and how you can spend the funds from each of those components. So as most of you are aware, the Workforce Retention Grant, it's one grant, but it has two components. Applicants were awarded the grant, they received both components and must comply with all grants terms and eligible expense types for each component. If your program did not have an approved staff on your staff roster, you would have only received component B payment. You can go ahead to the next slide. For component A, that was the staff retention bonuses. These funds were requested on behalf of each currently employed and eligible staff at your program, and the entirety, 100% of the staff retention bonus amount must have been given to each staff person if they remained eligible at the time of payment. A program must have provided at least half of the staff retention bonus payments to all eligible staff within 45 days of receiving the initial payment. They must give all or the whole amount of the staff bonus payment to all eligible staff within 90 days of the program receiving that payment. Component B, that was the second portion or second payment for some of you for the Workforce Retention Grant, and that was for the staff recruitment expenses and payroll tax assistance. So funds were requested to pay for expenses related to recruiting and hiring staff. Recruitment funds could also be used to pay longevity bonuses to existing staff, but that staff that were not eligible under Component A. And we'll go into a little bit more detail of the actual list of the eligible expenses a little bit later in this presentation. Eligible childcare programs also receive funds towards the employer portion of payroll taxes incurred while issuing the bonus payments. And that amount was included in the component B portion of your payment or the second portion of your payment. Go ahead. Now we're going to go into the expense report. So as of today, no one currently has this expense report available. However, we wanted to make sure that once it is available, all of you understand what the expense report is, what's being required for the expense report. So the expense report should be coming available within the next couple of weeks. So you can go ahead to the next slide, Piper. So all workforce retention grant recipients are required to report to OCFS details on how you use the component A and component B funds from this grant. So you're only reporting expenses that you are charging to the workforce retention grant funds. And again, you'll be reporting on the component A, which was the staff retention bonuses, which must be paid in full. 100% of component A had to go directly to your staff that were eligible. And component B, which is the staff recruitment expenses and payroll tax assistance. And just as a reminder, you do have until 9/1/2024 to spend the component B funds and to report on the component B funds. The component A funds, they had a different timeline. Those needed to be expended by 90 days from the date of payment to each of the individual staff that were eligible. All of your expenses must be documented carefully, and programs must retain all complete receipts for 5 years and be provided upon request by OCFS. So some of you may remember that when you completed your application for this grant, and if you go back in to your application, there is the ability to download your staff roster. That's a great tool and a great way for you to be able to track a lot of these expenses and the dates that you are paying your staff. Can go ahead, Piper. So now we're going to go into the actual expense report. So once the expense report becomes available, you're going to log into your New York State OCFS portal or your NYGov account. And you're going to see the screenshot that you see on your screen right here. In the submitted applications, you're going to find funding program, which is workforce retention grant. And all the way to the right under actions, you're going to see the workforce retention grant expense report 1, and you're going to click on that. And again, just you can see in this slide, if you look right in the middle under status, there is still the option to download your application and to download your staff list. So again, if you want to track when you're paying staff and how much you're paying staff, that's a great tool to use in order to track those expenses. Okay, so once you've signed in, you've found your expense report, it's going to bring you to the first screen, which is the instructions. We suggest that you read through the instructions thoroughly. And it's going to explain to you what is expected and give you some reminders from the SOI of what you agreed to for this grant. So at the bottom, it's going to say payroll tax assistance funds can be used to help offset payroll taxes paid by employers. Are you current and then it's going to ask you, are you currently open and providing care to at least one child? If you remember from the SOI, that was a requirement of this grant. You needed to be open and providing care to at least one non-relative child. And then you're going to select the appropriate option below and you'll hit the next screen. If you're a SAC program and you select yes, that you're open and operating, it's going to then ask you for the date that your program began operations. In the SOI, there was a specific date that SAC programs were required to be open and operating by in order to maintain their eligibility for the grant. So it is going to ask you to enter the date in which you began your operations for the school year. Can go ahead to the next slide. Reporting for component A. So next you're going to see basically the same thing that you saw when you were completing the application, which is a list of all of your eligible employees. So in the first column, you're going to see the employee's name. The second column, the employee bonus amount, that's going to tell you how much that employee should have received. In the third column, it's the staff retention bonus. It's going to ask you for each specific employee, was this employee paid the retention bonus of $2,300 in the case of Mary Lopez? So you are then going to select either yes or no. If you select yes, then you're saying that you paid the staff in full, the $2,300. If you select no, it's then going to give you an option to enter the amount that you have paid the staff up until this point. The next column, it's going to ask you to enter the date that you issued the payment to the staff. And the last column, the payment record description, you need to enter how you kept track of this, what records you're using to document that you gave this employee the payment. And as you can see, these three columns are all starred with a red star. They are required. You cannot leave any of these three columns blank. So again, it might be helpful to use that downloadable staff list to keep track of when you're issuing payments to your staff. So that way, when you come in to do the expense report, you have all the information right in front of you. Once you've answered these questions for each of your staff, at the bottom, you're going to see it's going to calculate the total staff retention bonus. The total staff retention bonus has been claimed on the expense report and the total remaining staff retention bonus. You can go ahead to the next screen. And again, for each of these staff members, you're going to answer the three questions that are on the expense report for each staff. So if you select yes, then you need to enter the date that you issued the payment, and you need to enter a record such as, for example, payroll is the way that you're tracking that you paid this employee. Go ahead to the next screen. And again, as I mentioned before, if you select no, so you're saying, no, I have not paid the staff the full $2,300. It is then going to give you another, below the no, it's going to then say, how much did you issue? And you're going to enter that. It's also going to ask you why. So let's say, for example, your employee, when you've completed the application, they were eligible. And by the time you received the payment, for whatever reason, they were no longer eligible. So you have not issued any funds to them. And for why, you're going to say employee no longer associated with the program. So they no longer work for your program. That would be your answer to why. Now this $2,300, as it states in the SOI, you can now use towards component B. So those funds, the $2,300, is going to move over into component B, and you'll be required to claim those funds under component B. And again, at the bottom of this page, that's going to be your little calculator. It's going to tell you how much retention bonus you had, how much you're claiming that you already expended on this report, and the total remaining that you have not claimed. Or I'm sorry, the retention bonus that will be moved to the recruitment expenses at the very bottom. So now we're going to get into reporting for component B. And again, component B is the staff recruitment expenses and payroll tax assistance. You have until 9/1/2024 to use the funds for this component B, staff recruitment expenses. Any unspent funds can be reported on the next expense report. So this is the first expense report that you're going to complete. It's not the last. So if you have not spent all of the component B funds, that is okay. We will have additional expense reports that will be issued. You also need to certify that the funds you received for the payroll tax assistance have been spent towards the employer portion of payroll taxes that you incurred while issuing the bonus payments. Go to the next screen. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a list of allowable uses for Component B funds. This is in the SOI. You can also refer back when this is posted on our website. So some of the other ways that you can expend Component B funds are providing bonuses for staff who are otherwise not eligible for their retention bonus, providing referral incentives for existing staff, paying for advertisement and marketing costs for staff vacancies, paying for recently hired staff benefit package costs. So there's a whole list of different ways that you can spend these Component B funds. And again, just as a reminder, for any of these ways that you spend the funds, you must keep records. So whether that's a receipt, whether that's a check, however you are keeping track of these, you need to keep those records for 5 years. So now, after you completed the first step, which was the component A for the staff retention bonuses, it's going to bring you to the reporting for component B, the staff recruitment expenses and payroll assistance. So as you can see in this screenshot on the screen, on the left side, it's going to give you each of the categories that we just discussed in the screen before. So recruitment sign-on bonus, bonus for staff not eligible for the retention bonus. So the first column is going to tell you what each of the categories are. The second column, it's going to be the amount that you've spent in this category. You're going to have to enter a description, and you're going to have to enter the type of record in how you're keeping track of these expenses. You can go ahead to the next screen. And again, at the bottom, it's going to have a little calculator for you. So it's going to tell you the total amount of recruitment funds that you've used and the total amount that are remaining that you have not accounted for yet. And then at the bottom of the page, it's going to ask you to certify that you received the payroll tax assistance award and that you spent this amount towards the employer portion of the payroll taxes. So you're not going to have to enter any other information about the payroll tax assistance award except for certifying that the funds you receive for that you did use towards the employer portion of the payroll taxes. And then lastly, the third step is going to be attestations. So you are going to agree to the terms and conditions. These are the same attestations that you agreed to when you applied for the workforce retention grant. And with the expense report, you are going to certify for each of them again. Just so you know, it will not allow you to move forward or submit unless you check each of these boxes. So you have to individually check each box certifying that you agree to the statement in order to move forward and submit your expense report. And again, it's just a screenshot showing that you have to check each of these boxes before you can hit submit and before you can submit your expense report. Okay. So that is our presentation as far as what the expense report is going to look like and um, what type of information you're going to need in order to complete the expense report. We do have a few Q&As that we came up with that we know are probably going to be a frequently asked question. So I'll go through those with you guys. We will do our best to take some questions. There is a lot of people on this call and a lot of questions coming in. If we do not get to all your questions, we will also be updating the FAQ document. So we will post that as soon as we've updated it to answer any of the questions that we may not get to today. So the first question is, how do I report component A funds that get moved to component B? So as we showed you in the previous slides, that you have the option to select that you have not issued any funds to a staff member that was originally eligible and now may not be eligible. So once that happens, those funds are automatically going to be shifted over to component B, and you can choose which type of expense you want to spend those funds on. You just have to make sure that you're documenting how you spent them and reporting the use of those funds on the component B section of the expense report. Another question that we thought may come up, how do I report if a staff is paid a staff retention bonus and any additional bonus from component B? So if you decided to issue additional bonuses on top of the component A bonus that your staff already received, you're going to first on the component A section, which is the top screenshot here, you're first going to report that yes, you paid this employee the amount that they should have received, the date, and a description. And then when you get to the component B section, there's two different categories. There's a bonus for staff transitioning from part-time to full-time. There's longevity bonus. There's also a category for staff that were not eligible for the component A bonus. So if you had $2,300 that you already paid the staff and you want to give them an additional $1,000, you would report that on the screenshot below. You would enter the $1,000 and you would go through each of the columns to enter the description and the type of record that you're keeping track of this payment. So you would report on the component A and component B, both on the same expense report. When do all funds for component B need to be spent by? Again, just as a reminder, for component B, you have until 9/1/2024 to spend these funds, and you will have additional expense reports that will come out where you can report the spending of these funds. For component A, that was the staff retention bonus, those had to have been issued the full amount 90 days from the day your program receives the payment. All right, so that is all the 3 questions that we had come up with. Was there anyone else from the OCFS team that wanted to add anything else before we go into answering some of the questions we're getting in the Q&A?
I'll just, for a moment, Jess, thank you for going through all that. Just that was extremely helpful. A lot of the questions that are in the Q&A have been answered during the presentation as well. And we're going to try to get to more of them. And some of them are very specific to the programs, and some are more broad around the whole, the system wide. We just want to continue to point all programs to not only our website that has a great deal of information on it, but it also has 2 very helpful links that it'll bring to. One is a 1-800 number. It's a helpline that's staffed from 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. That will take anyone's calls and questions about the workforce retention grant and how the funds were issued and what the requirements are. They can also help connect you with your local CCR&R if you're unfamiliar with who they are. On that website as well, we also have a link to the actual list of child care resource and referral agencies all across the state. It's divvied up by the county that your program resides. If you refer to that list, you can cross-reference it with your county and then make the call to them. Every CCR&R has a staff assigned to their organization that's there to help with the providers in answering questions around the grant, up to and including, payment-related matters of if they haven't received a payment yet, what might be holding it up. They can help you with rectifying, SFS account issues, or if you need help in understanding how to complete the expense report. Jessica and her team have also spent some time with them over the last few weeks, getting them up to date and familiar with the expense report, so they're ready to help you if the need arises. Just to encourage that these resources are there to help to try to make this reporting of funds as burdenless as possible. So just please lean on them and make the phone call. If you're having issues with contacting them, I encourage you just to be persistent. There are, depending on what part of the state that you're contacting them from, there's a great deal of people who are trying to get help and get their attention as well. So just being patient and persistent will be your best bet. And with that, I'll go back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, John. John, before you're done, can you just remind what the timing of the expense report is? Is it 90 days from the second payment?
Yep. So back in September, we released the second payments for just about all the programs that were originally assigned. So we readjusted when those payments are go out, and the final expense report is set to be launched 90 days after that second payment has been marked as paid in our system. So I saw a few questions in the queue on, what if I haven't received a payment yet? Will I be required to do an expense report? The answer will be no. Our system can detect when the payment has actually been issued, and the payment after the second payment, which is your component B funds, has been released, the background calendar starts to tick away, and it is 90 calendar days from when that payment has been released is when your expense report will become available to you.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I should do an introduction real quick. So my name is John Benson. I work for the Division of Child Care Services here at home office. Me and a lot of the other team members on this call have been very pleased to be able to work on many of the different grants over the last few years, up to and most recently the Workforce Retention Grant. And that's really all. Well, so we're going to try to take some of your questions. Many of them are already being answered in the Q&A box. So if you, I think we're at minute 116 right now. So if you asked a question before that, your question has probably already been responded to. Some of them are being responded to privately, because if it's a matter of your specific program, we're trying to help you, but at the same time, be sensitive to the information. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John and Jessica. We'll get to questions in just a minute, but there were quite a few questions regarding the presentation itself and if you would have access to the slides. Absolutely. We did have a request to get these translated into Spanish. So we're going to get these translated into Spanish, and we'll have the PowerPoint decks up on the website next week for you in English and Spanish. So just wanted to start with that. And then Jessica, is all right if we just start going down the list, starting with the questions that John and Rebecca have not gotten to yet?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Piper.
All right, let me see here. Let me find ones.
Well, I'll answer one because I see it coming up a lot, so we can just say it was
Great.
answered verbally. So there's a lot of questions around what date should you enter as the date that you paid out the bonuses. Specifically, if you issued the bonuses over multiple payments, which your program had the ability to do. The answer that we're putting in chat and the answer that you should go with would be when you satisfied the requirements. So as a reminder, you were required to issue half of the bonus within 45 days of having received the bonus money, which is important to say also receive the bonus money, because I saw some questions up there about if I haven't received the bonus, when should I pay it? And once your program has received the bonuses, you have 45 days to issue at least half of the grant, and you have a full 90 days to issue the entire bonus amount that you received. If you split it up into two separate payments, the date that you should enter is when you've satisfied the 100% aspect of that. So if you paid, $1,500 in the first month, and then after a month passed by and you paid the other $1,500, you would use the second date, the later date, when you issued the entire 100% of the bonus amount that you're reporting. Because when you're reporting it, you're saying, yes, I issued $3,000, and this was the date that I completed that by, effectively. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was looking, John, for some that multiple people were asking here. All right, so that was a good one to start with. Let's see. Okay. Question that came in was, I just assigned a bunch to myself. For staff, oh, here we go. John L asked at 122, John says, we run several childhood centers. Can we use component B funds from one center to fill gaps across other centers?
No. So the funds that were issued to that program specifically are meant for that program. So if you have whatever the component B, these are your recruitment expenses, those are limited to the program that actually applied for the funds and received the funds. I'm not familiar with your exact situation, but I would assume that the other programs hopefully did also apply for the grant and also receive the funds. But the eligibility criteria is specific to that program, so we wouldn't be able to know whether or not those programs actually were eligible or received those funds. So the money that you received for that program, that from the application, that was approved and issued are meant for that program specifically.
Wonderful. All right, staff bonus questions. Lots of questions about staff bonuses. So one that came up was from Brianna at 123 for staff bonuses. Do the staff that are eligible receive the full bonus amount for a pay cycle, salary increase, or is that amount for the whole year? So any guidance regarding that, or is it program to program how they disperse those funds?
I don't know if I'm completely understanding the question, but do the staff that are eligible receive that full bonus amount for a pay cycle salary increase? So if a staff is eligible for the staff bonus, the component A portion, that full amount must be issued to the staff within 90 days of your program receiving that payment. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but if you have an additional question that Brianna, just feel free to type it in.
And just as a reminder, too, to tag on to that, so the programs had the flexibility to be able to determine the pay schedule for when they were going to issue the bonuses out. But like Jessica said, that there were the two criteria that we had laid out in the solicitation of interest, and that was half of the bonus had to be issued within 45 days, and the entire bonus had to be issued within 90 days. A program wasn't obligated to wait a full 90 days if they wanted. As soon as they received the bonus to issue it in a one-time payment because it was easier to manage, that's also at their discretion. The requirements are half within 45 days and the entirety within 90. If a program wanted to break it down into 3 or 4 payments, that was also at their discretion, as long as they follow those two rules.
Great. Okay. Moving along, we had a bunch of questions come in. I just saw another one. For those that have home-based programs and they are the only provider, and they had questions about how to pay themselves, and um, and how do they report funds for component B. So two sort of questions there. Any guidance for home-based providers?
Sure. So there is a whole list of eligible use of funds for under component B, but it can be somewhat program specific. So like I think for specific questions about how you could use it in your program, that's exactly what we would redirect you to the CCR&R to assist you with, because we've had some discussions with them on how to help guide specifically every modality of, on how to use the funds or what might be helpful to those modalities. So I would just encourage you to call your CCR&R and have that conversation of, I'm just not sure, and then they can help you out with that.
Wonderful. And I did put the link to the CCR&Rs in the chat, so be sure to look for that. And if you don't know who your local CCR&R is, that page is great and it'll let you search for that CCR&R. All right. We did also have a couple of questions about about employees that were eligible when the program applied for the grant and then are no longer eligible. What should they do in those instances? For example, Peggy asks, if an employer left on my roster prior to the check, an employee left prior to the check coming, how do you enter this in component A? Do we put a zero amount in there? What do we do? And I'm gonna go to that slide, Jessica, so you can talk through that again.
Okay, thanks, Piper.
There you go.
Thanks. So for component A, as it's stated in the SOI, if you have a staff that was eligible at the time that you submitted your application, but is not eligible the time when you receive payment from OCFS and you're going to issue it, you are going to report that in this section that's in the red box on the expense report. So the first question it's going to ask you, was the employee paid the retention bonus of $2,300 or whatever amount is appropriate for your facility? So you are going to select no. Once you select no there, the next question is going to pop up underneath. How much was issued? And if you did not issue any, you're going to keep that as a $0 there. And then the third question that's going to pop up underneath that is why. So that's where you're going to identify why you are not giving the bonus to this employee. It gives you options. The employee no longer is associated to the program, the employee rejected the bonus, or it has an other. So if you select other, it'll give you a box that you can type into to explain the reason why this employee did not receive the bonus. You do not have to send the funds back. Those funds can then be used for component B. And once you indicate on your expense report the reason why you are not paying this employee and that you did not issue any funds to them, those funds will automatically move over to your component B section of your expense report. So you would have an additional $2,300 to spend for component B portion. And hopefully that answers the question. And if, like John mentioned earlier, if you have additional questions specifically related to certain staff, or if they should or should not be paid or are eligible or not, again, your CCR&R would be a great resource to reach out to. They can assist you with answering any of those specific program questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. All right. Lots of questions about the countdown calendar days versus that 45/90 days. Calendar days versus business days. John, do you want to repeat the answer that you put in the Q&A for everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So it's 40. So we're going based off of calendar days. So it's 45 days, 45 calendar days after the funds were issued, 90 days at calendar days after the funds were 100% issued. That's also when the expense report will become available to you.
Great, thank you. All right, lots of questions also about component B. So a question came in asking for, can I use component B towards payroll expenses for new staff training hours? So a recommendation here is to look at the SOI and look at all of those expenses here. And these are the expenses that you can use component B for. Any other thoughts on that? I'm sure you all saw lots of questions around component B and spending those funds.
Yes, I saw a lot of questions on longevity bonuses and bonuses to staff who are otherwise not eligible. John, you want to speak a little bit on that, if that's possible? I can point you to some times.
I think it's the hard part about it. There's a lot of significant, it's not significant, pardon me, individualized questions about how to use the component B funds. All the bullet points in front of on the screen right now are the ones that we were able to quickly and easily identify, but I also want to call attention to the top line, which is allowable uses for staff recruitment grant funds include, but are not limited to, these different criteria. So the idea behind that, the goal behind that, is that there may be other uses of recruitment expenses that you could justify under here. But if you have specific questions about one specific example of it, and you're not quite sure, you can always contact your local CCR&R. They should have the answer for you, and if they don't, they can always escalate to us and OCFS, who can answer it specifically and get it back to you. It would have been almost impossible to create an all-encompassing list of what would be considered a recruitment expense. Sometimes there's could be work fair or job fairs or whatever the case may be. But this list is meant to be the ones that were likely applicable to most. But we did have the caveat of but not limited to, and the idea that these expenses are meant for recruitment activities. And if you want a specific answer to one item that you have, again, I just encourage you to contact your CCR&R, who should be able to help you out. If they can't, they can always escalate to OCFS, and we will answer it.
And yes, you can issue longevity bonuses to staff who receive component A. according to the allowable uses on this page. So I think that answers a couple of questions that we saw. And also just to highlight, you can provide bonuses for staff who were not eligible for component A. That's another bullet, and I saw a question on that.
And just before we move on, Piper, there was two other things I wanted to just touch on really quickly, is that specifically around the bonuses paid to, for component A, bonuses paid to the employees, is that the program, when you're applying for the grant, is obligated to answer the questions in the application that were true for their staff and if they met the eligibility criteria. It's very important that this is not used for any kind of, that component A funds were not there for any kind of incentive-based program for, select few individuals working at the actual programs themselves. These funds were meant to be for anybody working at the programs that fit the criteria within the SOI. So, I've seen a few questions about, like, does the employer have the ability to scale the bonus? The answer to that is no. If the employee is eligible for the grant at the time of the program was applying, that they should receive the bonus. If they subsequently leave from the program, become expunged by the program, that expungement makes them no longer eligible to receive the funds because they no longer work at your program, assuming that the timelines line up. So that the program receives the funds and the person was there or left prior to 45 days, then you're not obligated to pay them a bonus. However, if they are there beyond 45 days, then the program is obligated to pay them half of the bonus. If the employee was not eligible at the time of application, and then that would be considered a mistake on the application. And if you do make a mistake on the application and you accidentally marked somebody who was eligible that was not, the best thing to do would be to contact your local CCR&R, and they can walk you through what the next steps of that process are.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. While we're talking about component A, I did see a new question come in about somebody asked what to do if an individual has rejected the bonus. This came in from Christine at 145. Jessica went over this earlier, but if they rejected it, then in that staff retention bonus column, you would select no to the first question, how much was issued, 0, and then employee rejected bonus is actually one of the options here. So just when you get to this page, select the appropriate selections there. All right.
And I'll tag on to that, Piper.
Yeah, go
So
for it.
those two reasons that are on that box, those are the two reasons that were actually specifically called out within the SOI. Is that one, if the employee is no longer associated to the program, they have been expunged from the program prior to the date that the payment had to be made, or they rejected the bonus themselves. Those are the two examples that were actually called out specifically within the SOI. And other reason, if entered as other and written in, OCFS will be reviewing those just to make sure that they are in line with the solicitation of interest.
Great, thank you for that. Jessica McKinley had M had a couple of questions. So Jessica is wondering, will an email go out to everyone to let them know that the expense report is live?
Yes, you should receive a notification once the expense report is available for your program with a link to go and log in and complete the expense report. But it will not be a mass email that everyone receives at one time because everyone has different dates that their payments moved into paid status. So it will vary. The date that it's ready for your program to go in and complete will vary.
Good point, Jessica. I think that's really important. So if you talk to somebody else and they got their report at link and you didn't get yours, remember it will vary based on when you received your monies. Another question from Jessica is, I got the money, paid it to my assistant. How do I report that? Well, Jessica, if it was a staff retention bonus, then once you get that email that says the report is available for you, you will just log in and complete the questions here under component A. And if you also paid them or just paid them component B, you'd follow those same sort of that same direction, but go to component B and indicate how you paid them there. All right, so many great questions today. I love these. Lots to add to our Q&A. Another question came in about paying funds. So what happens if a program, now we're talking about a year from now, which seems a long time, but what happens in the event that a program is unable to spend their funds by September 1st of 2024? Now, we hope that you will all be able to spend the funds, but what should happen if they have any monies left over at the end of that time?
Agreed, Piper. We hope that there are enough ways for you listed for you guys to be able to spend these funds that we do not run into that scenario. But if that does happen, and you have funds that you have not accounted for in an expense report by 9/1/2024, you will be asked to return those funds to the state. So we would like to avoid that. And if you have questions on how to spend these funds or what type of expenses are eligible, again, you can refer to our website. We have lots of great resources, or reaching out to your CCR&R. They also will be able to assist you in ways that you can spend these funds.
Great. Lots of questions too. And I don't know, you might want to refer these people to their CCR&R, or you might want to reach out to them. I don't know what your guidance is, but we did have a couple of questions come in from people who did not pay eligible staff within the 45 days of receiving the bonus. They didn't pay them that 50%, or they, misread those directions. What's your guidance for these individuals? Is there anything they should do?
I would say to make those payments to your staff as, now. Um, do not wait past the 90-day mark. And we do have avenues for staff to also reach out if they haven't received their bonuses for any specific reason. So if you have not paid your staff 50% by the 45 days, you may receive an email from OCFS just reaching out to find out why that did not happen. But please pay those staff now.
We're also encouraging people to document the delay and just keep it for your own records in case it's ever asked for in the future.
Great.
And I would just iterate too that that's extremely important. It's within the terms of the solicitation of interest itself, has the timeline there that the programs, by applying for and receiving the funds, have agreed to comply with. So if you have not issued those funds within 45 days, then your program is not compliant with the solicitation of interest and is at risk of having the grant or be closed, and then also may be subject to recoupment of the funds. So it's imperative that all grant recipients adhere to the rules of the solicitation of interest. And if you're not sure, then again, please contact your CCR&R. But there will be no reasoning, I would be the word, is to allow for any for not issuing the funds within the allotted timeline. So even though you may want to document, like Rebecca said, that will not necessarily suffice. It's imperative that the program adheres to the requirements within the SOI.
And speaking about that, again, some confusion about the 90 days, 45 days. So when does that clock start ticking, John, Jessica, Rebecca? Is it when that money is
Well,
deposited or when they receive those funds, right? Some folks did get checks and they say there was a lapse. So can you can you remind
so
everybody
it,
about that?
so there's a date that in our system we're able to monitor the date that the program actually received the payment. So we're going off of the date that the program received the payment is the date that they issued the funds that the timeline for 45 days, 90 days begins. So if your program received it on the 1st and then didn't deposit the check to the 10th, OCFS is still going based off of the 1st.
Great. All right. So on to component B again. Couple of questions about how to spend these funds. One individual, Sabrina, asked at 148, can we give this out to longtime staff members? Does it have to be the same amount, or can we go by the length of timed employee, etc.? So this is really up to you, right? So you can determine, as long as it falls under staff recruitment funds, how you use those funds. So sure, you could give monies to individuals that have been there 10 years, you give more to them, you could give some to people that just joined. But the component A has very has very strict guidelines, but component B, you can use that monies in different ways, as long as it falls under the umbrella of recruitment, staff recruitment activities. All right. So many great questions today. I think OCFS, we probably have about 6 minutes left. I'm thinking we have time for maybe 2 more questions. John and Rebecca, I know you have been furiously answering questions. Are there 2 sort of overarching questions that you'd like to end with today?
I'm still just seeing a lot of questions from different individuals about not having received funds just as of yet. So there's a whole host of different reasons why that could potentially be happening with your program. But the thing is that they're very specific sort of lanes as what could be going on. The best way to be able to get information about what might be happening with your payments or what the delay might be, it would be to contact your local CCR&R. I also wanted to call out that earlier in the session, there was one individual who had said that they had contacted their CCR&R several times, and the issue hasn't been resolved, and they're asking if it can be escalated. And I was able to look it up while we were talking, and the issue had been escalated from the CCR&R to OCFS, and we are actively working on the review, so that way we can release the payments. So it might not be an issue of non-responsive; it might just be an issue of closing up the circle. But again, if you're just not sure of what's going on with your payments or any really of the areas that we covered throughout this presentation, we just continue to encourage you to use the multiple resources that we have available. First and foremost, the OCFS website that we've tried to jam-pack that specific workforce retention grant page with resources that should be helpful to all of the providers, regardless of your modality. There's also a 1-800 number where you can call and get answers to a lot of your specific questions. There's also a helpline that's designated for specifically the workforce. If they have any questions, it might be, they can also call us and ask us, I haven't received my bonus yet, and that helpline is available to them. In addition, there's a list on there for how to locate and contact your local child care resource or referral agency, who again has one person at every single one of the agencies across the state who is there to assist all providers with all the different funding opportunities that OCFS has been able to issue over the last few years. So if you have any questions, I just encourage you, again, website, the 1-800 line, as well as your local CCR&R are great resources. OCFS is continually updating all of those resources with new and additional information, up to including there's many questions that we received in this session and the next few sessions that we have scheduled that we will likely take and apply them into our FAQ document that's already available to you. I would just like to thank Jessica and Piper for hosting this session, and I think it was very helpful and very well done, and I appreciate your help.
Wonderful. And with that, I will thank John and Jessica and Rebecca and everybody behind the scenes who is fiercely answering questions. And thank all of you for attending. If you have more questions, we do have 3 more of these sessions over the next couple of weeks. Feel free to register for another. And again, the PowerPoint will be posted in English and Spanish next week. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week.